On International Men's Day, International Men's Day, International Men's Day, on International Men...
Lord bless us, this is gonna be a great day.
HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. Women in general, especially feminists, but truth be told, most women do it, spend a lot of time telling men how to be based on feminine sensibilities and interests. The toxic masculinity narrative is kind of made of that. The assertion that men are wrong anytime they handle any experience differently than a woman would, or thinks they should. Many women even carry that over into dating to the degree that each new love interest becomes a project rather than a partner. Then, when they get him fixed, they dump him and move on to the next, now more exciting project. Guys are bombarded with messages about how being different from women makes them bad and how they can learn from women to be, quote, better. One of the dumbest examples of this occurs in discussion about suicide as a gender issue. Everyone agrees that the majority of completed suicides involve male deaths and that the incidence of this is a serious issue. Oppression Olympic feminists are quick to trot out the claim that women and girls attempt suicide far more than men and boys do, while their academic counterparts are pushing feminization of men's mental health as, quote, a solution to male suicide. The claim? Fewer men would commit suicide if they handled the issues that make them suicidal the way women handle their issues. But wait, if women attempt suicide more, a feminist talking point that itself is questionable, wouldn't men handling their pain the way women do just lead to more male suicide? This is one of the most frustrating things feminists do, and it's especially grating on International Men's Day when they come out in droves to offer be more like women as a proposed solution to men's human rights issues. Rather than being prepared to deal with unequal standards and practices in law and policy that end up disadvantaging men and boys, they exploit those disadvantages as an opportunity to preach at those who suffer from them. The resulting deluge of condemnation and castigation are then hailed as pro-male feminism and a sign that feminists really do care about men. They seem genuinely shocked to learn that, hey guys, you're only suffering because you're defective, and if you'd just stop being defective, things would get better, doesn't come across as a supportive attitude. They just think men have a few things to learn from women, you see. Things like how to be more, quote, emotionally intelligent, talking about their feelings. Things like asking for help when they're facing hardship or abuse. Things like crying instead of keeping pain bottled up. And the discrimination and other disadvantages they're experiencing will magically disappear. It sounds great from a feminist perspective. You just have to ignore the biological differences between male and female brains that would undermine most of these arguments and the social environment that would undermine the rest. Pay no attention to the fact that as boys mature, they develop a loss of the mechanism for crying. Take no notice of the masculine drive toward active problem solving and how that would affect a man's emotional healing process. Don't look at the way society reacts to men's complaints by sweeping them under the rug at the nicest, or at worst, turning on them with accusations and punishments for speaking up. It's misogynistic of critics like us to analyze women's obviously perfect advice, don't you know? You just fail to appreciate feminine genius, we're told. We're admonished to try to learn from women for once, instead of being so critical. Yes, even those of us who are women are supposed to abandon our toxic masculinity and learn from feminism's big list of things women do better. Well then, how about the reverse? Surely if feminism is about equality and not about hating men, if feminists truly believe the sexes are equal, then they must acknowledge that men are as good, as smart, as wise, as capable, and as correct in their handling of life as women are. There must even be things men do better. After all, if women don't have to be identical to men in order to be as self-determining and as competent as men are, then the reverse must be true as well. There must be, therefore, some things that women and girls can learn from men and boys. One good example of this that goes directly against feminism's talk more admonition is what I learned from my brother's natural toughness. I remember the first time I realized that he and I handled pain very differently. We were in elementary school. We had come home and kicked our shoes off during one of the first warm days of spring, and while running around the yard barefoot, he had gotten a bee sting. An experience like that would have sent me shrieking to my mother for first aid, but not my little brother. He sat down, examined his foot, pulled the bee off of it, and then calmly began messing with the area that had been stung. He didn't say anything about it until I asked him, and he didn't cry. I went in and got Mom, who he calmly informed, I think I got stung by a bee. He never did cry over it. When I asked why, he said, crying doesn't make it better, so why should I? He'd learned that lesson by the first grade. A few years of that level of toughness continued. Then one day Mom got a call from his 4th grade teacher. My brother had been sitting in class, quietly trying to control tears of pain due to an excruciating headache that he said was behind his eye. Mom called the family doctor, who, upon hearing that he was not just complaining about the pain, but crying, told Mom to pick him up from school and meet her at the emergency room. There, the condition she suspected was confirmed and he was rushed into surgery. When the surgeon drilled into the sinus above his eye, the fluid that had been trapped there shot out with such force that it ricocheted off the ceiling, indicating some serious pressure. I can guarantee you my mom didn't panic and call the doctor every time I cried over pain, because she'd have been on the phone for advice about every normal childhood scrape and bruise I ever had. The difference between my brother and me made one thing obvious. The less you complain about adverse experiences, the more seriously you are taken, at least by wise and observant people, when you speak up. I took the lesson and resolved to become a tougher person. While my little brother was not the only tough person to ever act as an example for me, I don't know if he realizes he was the first person to really inspire me through his own habits to try not to sweat the small stuff, lest it overwhelm those who might otherwise care about the big stuff. I had a lot of lessons like this from the men and boys in my life. I learned my father's work ethic and his professionalism by working with him. He also taught me that power and strength aren't the same thing, and displaying the former is not a sign of the latter. In fact, the exercise of restraint can be a more profound demonstration of strength than any use of power. From the men and boys under whose influence I grew up, I learned what separates respect from pedestalization, how to earn and show respect, and why pedestalization is insulting. I was offered humor, teamwork, and good sportsmanship as tools for facilitating human connection where awkwardness would otherwise have socially crippled me. I was encouraged to build on my strengths and fight to overcome or at least improve where I have weaknesses, and learned that small, quiet displays of trust in one's reliability and integrity are infinitely more valuable than all the praise in the world. All too often, women have a tendency to respond to the differences between feminine and masculine approaches to everyday life as if those differences are an attack on the feminine. That's a huge mistake, as very much of the masculine is shaped by cooperation with, protection of, and accommodation of the feminine. Men and boys already do take a lot of cues from women and girls in their lives. What many women, especially feminists, get wrong is their assumption that this is because masculinity is defective and needs to be fixed by femininity. The sexes, the genders, whatever. We're a team, even when we're not a romantic one. Women have as much to learn from the nature and character of men as they can from us, and we absolutely should. That's not an insult, it's a resource, one only a fool would reject. This week, HBR Talk will examine ways women can learn from men. The discussion streams on multiple platforms. You can tune in Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern via the link in the low bar, or find other viewing and listening options for that time or later on badgerfeed.com.